Everyone treats summer like it owes you happiness. Long days, pool parties, your best life on a loop. So what does it mean when you feel worse? The summer blues are real. It's why summer is one of the busiest stretches of the year for people starting therapy. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Growth therapy is for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach. It's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/booknow today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/booknow. growtherapy.com/booknow. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management, archaeology, and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 337. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Bill, in Northern California.
Good morning.
Andrew in Southern California.
Well, hello.
And Renee in the beautiful state of Colorado.
What up, people?
Today, we're going to do it real quick. There will be more coming, but we're going to do an introductory podcast about Section 106. Probably the next few episodes will be about Section 106, but we're going to introduce it right now. And Andrew, could you read Section 106? I know it's really long, but bear with us all as Andrew reads the actual language of Section 106.
Wait, are you saying I get to hear my own voice for like an extended period of time?
Every now and then.
This is awesome.
These are the parts I fast forward past. So
that's right. Okay, well, get your
2x, 7x.
Get your finger ready on the fast forward button, because here we go. All right, you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the actual Section 106 as it's written in the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, right? So this is the actual Section 106. And what we have to realize is what we're arguing about is not Section 106 itself. It's how it's what's called codified into law. It's how it's utilized. It's how we've decided over the decades to utilize it. And that utilization of Section 106 is in a document called 36 CFR 800. And that's the document that's like 50 pages long and changes over time and gets stronger and weaker and all that kind of stuff, right? So, but what we want to realize is the entire sort of power of the National Historic Preservation Act in terms of archaeology comes from this quote. I'm going to read it. It's a little jumbly, and it is only 2 sentences. So all of CRM really hinges on these 2 sentences. Here we go. The head of any federal agency having direct or indirect jurisdiction over a proposed federal or federally assisted undertaking in any state, and the head of any federal department or interdepartment agency having authority to license any undertaking shall, prior to the approval of the expenditure of any federal funds on the undertaking or the issuance of any license, as the case may be, take into account the effect of the undertaking on any historic property included in or eligible for inclusion in the National Register. The head of any such federal agency shall afford the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation a reasonable opportunity to comment with regard to the undertaking. There you go. That's it. That's why
Short.
modern CRM is here.
And sweet.
Yep.
Short.
Where's
and
the
sweet.
applause? We used to have an applause button.
I know the
Oh, my
applause
goodness.
button.
We need that, like
Dude.
the radio show. Great job.
Dude, I know.
Yeah.
So, and you guys, I think as many of us have been, I've been delving into this because like I want to understand more, and it's funny. It's kind of hard to find this quote. Like when you Google it and stuff, it doesn't come up right away. It immediately sends you to all the stipulations in 36 CFR 800 and all this kind of stuff. So just realize underneath it all, this is section 106. This paragraph is not going anywhere, right? This is not being cut out of the law or something. What we're arguing about is what this paragraph means and how we as Americans will use this to protect our past. That's the argument.
And the instructions that are those regulations that guide how that is interpreted. Section 106 is interpreted and facilitated. That's what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason why we're talking about Section 106, even though we probably should talk about it all the time, but we always talk about other stuff, is because there currently was a proposal to change those implementing regulations that are in 36 CFR 800. There was a proposal to change the way we implement those laws to the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. And so, I guess I'll talk about that nerdy stuff too, right? So the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, as called for in Section 106, is the federal government's kind of adjudicating body that is able to manage any kind of conflicts in Section 106, right? So the way that the law is set up, the federal government says that agencies are supposed to take effects on historic properties into account, but it delegates those powers to states through state historic preservation offices, because the idea was that the federal government, why would they say what's going to happen in Idaho or California or something like that when the state itself can make those decisions, right? So it calls for the creation of a state historic preservation office. And the state historic preservation office is the one that you are writing the significant statement to. So when you find a site and it meets all the criteria for the state that you're in, and you're putting together that, thing like, do you recommend this eligible for the National Register? It's the state historic preservation office that's supposed to review your stuff and say yes or no, or, hey, I don't know about that. Maybe you should clarify, right? Okay, so the state's supposed to do that. Well, the agency also could say, well, this is messed up. I don't really understand how they've determined the site. We need more guidance. The Advisory Council is where the guidance is supposed to come from. The Advisory Council is appointed by the executive branch, except for the president of the National Tribal Historic Preservation Offices and the president of the National Councils for State Historic Preservation Offices, right? So you can see that this changes over time, right? Now, what the rule recommendations were that the Advisory Council change the process for how we look at historic properties. And so there's a lot of information that's going on out in the world, but basically the rules, they make some pretty big changes. The way that 36 CFR 800 is written, communities are supposed to be able to comment, and they're supposed to be more engaged in a consultation process if they have that legal designation or if they're an interested party, right? Well, they're trying to change that so that the head of the agency gets to decide whether consultation happens or whether they really need to listen to it, right? Now, once again, this is not in actual Section 106, and in 36 CFR, it says that they're supposed to do consultation in a certain way. Well, they're trying to change those mechanisms so that it's complicated for communities to get their voices heard more clearly. And also it creates a pathway for the head of an agency to decide whether or not they're going to listen to those things, right? It also reduces the opportunities of when Section 106 is applied. And so they're saying that there's only a certain number of specific cases when Section 106 should be applied, and that it's supposed to be more of that Section 106 is just supposed to be a consideration amongst many other laws, and it's not actually supposed to stop projects. It says that these rule recommendations say that agencies can decide if a financial benefit outweighs doing the Section 106 process. And the thing about this is there are 60 years of case law that go against many of these things that are proposed changes. And so like a lot of us that have done our cultural resources archaeology for a long time are looking at these rules and saying, well, like, how are you going to implement any of that stuff? Or also like, how will the head of an agency that is overwhelmed with so many things to think about going to know when or when not a building is historical, right? Like if you're a project proponent and you want to build something like a pipeline, a super complicated engineering task, and you're trying to coordinate across a bunch of state regulations, like one of the things that you should be able to rely on is the way we interpret and apply the federal laws. But there could be multiple state agencies with multiple heads that do it in a different way. And now you're like listening to people in these other areas that, you know, maybe they don't understand what's going on, right? And so as with any kind of change, probably with the initiation of the National Historic Preservation Act, there was a huge number of complications, and we had the advisory council there to help us navigate through it. And we've had court decisions and a whole bunch of different policy practices between different agencies. We built all those up. Well, this changes many of those things, right? And so what a lot of people are saying is like, well, what does this mean for cultural resources, right? If they decide, if whole agencies decide they're no longer going to actually go and look for sites, you know, how is that going to be applied, right? Because there's other stuff like the National Environmental Policy Act that says that you still have to care about cultural resources, except for the National Environmental Policy Act does not outline a system of how you do that. It just defaults to Section 106 and 36 CFR 800. So you can see how like having these changes without them being well thought out, with it just being like shipped in on a Microsoft Word document and people just saying, yeah, that sounds good, I'll vote for that, right? Like you can see how this is going to be super complicated. It's going to add, you know, unpredictability and messes to, you know, construction systems, but also it's created a huge amount of panic among archaeologists.
Okay, so damn, Bill, I thought that was excellent. And I think at this point, we are just going to take a break from that awesomeness, and we'll see you guys on the other side.
Right on.
Welcome back to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 337. Today, we're talking about the all popular Section 106. Let's see, modifications that were just voted on Friday by the ACHP. And Bill, you have a good, you know, I think it'd be good for us to just give a little bit of a background, a history of where these regulations came from that help us interpret Section 106.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like most of these kind of laws that aren't, you know, for protecting lives, they came from advocacy from people across the country. The original National Historic Preservation Act was signed in 1966, and it wasn't signed overnight. I mean, people had been pushing for historic preservation in the United States since the 19th century. But by the 1960s, there were a bunch of development projects that were happening. Like they were cutting freeways through cities like New York City. In New York City, they destroyed Penn Station. In Boise, Idaho, where I'm from, they destroyed the entire downtown core with a wrecking ball, calling it urban renewal. And so there were these urban renewal projects that were going on all over the country. There were communities that were being displaced, people of color, poor, low-income folks that were being displaced, but also out in the countryside, there was a lot of development of farmland and entire landscapes being turned into subdivisions. And so there was just this huge wave of development that was happening, and more constituencies were getting frustrated about their landscapes getting destroyed. And they started to protest in local meetings and in local community meetings. And the National Council of Mayors in 1965, I think, met and convened, and they wrote a report called With Heritage So Rich. It defined how development was annihilating a bunch of communities in older neighborhoods and cities. And by 1966, the Congress passed the National Historic Preservation Act, and it was signed by Nixon. Lady Bird Johnson was the one who pushed it forward, and LBJ signed that one. But in 1969, the person who signed the National Environmental Policy Act is Nixon. And time again, we've seen where this is a bipartisan issue that people care about heritage sites. And the reason why the politicians ever care is because their constituencies that are not defined to any political, platform are getting pissed off when their stuff gets destroyed. And so when there's changes like this, it's quite likely that there's going to be communities and constituencies who are going to vote out a bunch of legislators. And when they start to realize that their team is losing people, then that's when they start to act at the federal level. And so we got these laws through advocacy of people, right? That's how we even got those things. Since then, time and time again, forces, commercial forces, sometimes it's government agencies, will push to change these laws. And time again, it's people from the community who push to maintain them, right? So once again, the actual law, the National Historic Preservation Act, is not being stricken from the Federal Register. The changes are being proposed to the way those laws are implemented. And once again, it's going to be up to communities to decide how this whole thing unfolds.
Thank you, Bill. I think, another thing to remember, just to kind of put this all in context, the last time that there were minor amendments that occurred in 2004, the largest or most expansive rewrite of the Section 106 regulations was in 2001. So this doesn't happen very often. And that these are obviously, you could definitely say this is a major rewrite. And boy, I think for me, I think we all need to take a step back as a profession and understand that there are people, I see a lot of division and a lot of blaming and a lot of emotion. And, as regulators, as professionals, we really need to stay as objective as possible. Emotion is not going to get us anywhere at this time. We need to really be focusing, and everybody has a responsibility before they start jumping on the bandwagon and making all these comments. Everybody has a responsibility to educate themselves and to understand what these regulations truly are, what they mean, what they do. I would say, to say that these can affect things on a large scale absolutely is going to affect our profession on a large scale, but you have to understand what the limits are. This is about federal projects. Federal projects, for those that don't understand, are those that are either federally funded or on federal properties or have some sort of federal permit that is involved. So this isn't about the local jurisdictions. There's, quite a few of us work in California largely. And so, a lot of the work that happens there is not going to be impacted. And so this is something that people need to know what the larger impact is of this.
Yeah, behind the scenes, a lot of our historic preservation organizations are working to figure out a strategy, but also to advise Congress on this. So the National Trust for Historic Preservation has made statements about how this will change the Section 106 process in not a good way. They also are connected to a lot of people who donated the lands to establish those trusts. The National Trust has always been advisor for the Advisory Council. And so they kind of actually work together. And also the National Trust maintains the National Register of Historic Places, right? So like there's folks that are in the government that are working on clarifying these things. Also, the American Cultural Resources Association has made statements on it too. And they're also trying to connect at the local level and across different constituencies to figure out, what does this actually in fact mean for our state or our community or the cultural resources organizations there. And then, I haven't heard anything from the Society for American Archaeology or Society for Historical Archaeology, but I guarantee you the people on the board, they're doing something with that too. And, at the end of the day, these rules, I've always have felt like cultural resources depended on a small mandate of laws, right? Like you have some industries where there's these vast, compendiums of rules that guide, how human resources are executed or how you install an elevator and maintain it, right? Cultural resources was always dependent on 2 sentences in one corner of one law, right? And so I've always felt that I go to other countries and they have these whole different national monuments organizations, and they have, living museum, kind of cultural outreach and heritage carpentry programs and stuff. And I'm always wondering why doesn't my country have more robust stuff like that? Because those countries have built those laws over time to maintain these historic buildings or to maintain these open spaces or forests or all these different things, right? And so one of the things we might want to think about is, how come our industry is threatened when they changed the way that 2 sentences are read? Why don't we have more robust protections for what we do?
I think it's something like my mom used to call it. She used to buy and sell homes, and she'd walk in, she goes, "This is a hillbilly special." And no offense to hillbillies, but it's a hot, because I love hillbillies.
Yeah, no offense.
But it's happened. It's been a hodgepodge over time when you have that, that's, That's a recipe for a continuing hodgepodge, right? Where it's just a, addition here and addition there, modification here and there, different avenues of protection, whether it be, at the local level or whatnot. This is not a new thing. I think about, like, I live in Santa Barbara. There was a woman by the name of Pearl Chase, and she really strongly believed that Santa Barbara was just a beautiful place to come and visit, but it looked terrible. I mean, it really was this Wild West type of a town that was dirty and it had a hodgepodge look. Now, if you look and you Google, if you've never been to Santa Barbara, Google it up. It has a very comprehensive, very distinct look, and it's consistent across the city. And that was all because of her plan. And that happened in the early 1900s. So just like Bill was saying, this kind of stuff was happening way before ACHP actually came along, or Section 106 actually came along. And the one thing that I would like to remind people is that there are people on both sides. And again, we need to be really careful about not getting political here, because I see a lot of that online, which is not going to help our cause at all. We need to be reaching over the aisle. We need to be doing everything that we can to help get the message out to those that may have a misunderstanding. So I think there's misunderstandings on our end. I think there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of education on our end. A lot of people spitting out a lot of crap, in my opinion, on social media, that from ignorance. People do not understand the Section 106, and they don't understand the ACHP and their role in it. So I think, but on the other side, neither does the other side of the aisle that actually have more influence right now in what happens right now. And the other thing to remember is that they love history too. Okay.
Yeah.
We have people on both sides that are passionate about history and passionate about restoring our history and passionate about protecting our history. That is not unique to one side. And that is where we need to find the connection between both sides. And that is the only way, to me, and the only way forward is for us to find our similarities and not to be accentuating the differences. And that's the case in anything. When you want to move forward and find a middle ground and find the best path forward, being reactionary and letting the pendulum swing like crazy back and forth doesn't help anyone, because what it does, it has unintended consequences. And with that, I think we're going to take this to the next segment. We'll be right back. All right. Welcome back to CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 337. Today we're talking about Section 106, and we're going to wrap it up with next steps. Bill.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I mentioned in the back chat, the rule changes were voted in on Friday. What the heck day is it? July 24th, 2026. But there's going to be a 30-day window when communities can make statements. And I've already mentioned that, our major archaeology organizations, they're all making statements about, their perspective on this legislation. And you as a citizen, once again, you have a chance to make a statement too. But here's the reality. There's like a statement, and then there's a statement they have to listen to. And the statement that they don't have to listen to is just someone freaking out about how, tearing down this forest is going to threaten their favorite mushroom collecting corner, right? So that's the kind of thing that they're not really going to pay a lot of attention to. The kind of statements they will pay attention to are ones that are substantive and like rooted in reality, right? So if you have a project where, the consultation from a tribe actually did help the whole thing move through, and, it was an excellent example of how Section 106 works as planned and didn't hold up projects or didn't cause problems, and we all learned more than we ever did before, then that's the kind of one where, delays in interpreting the law caused millions of dollars in, shortfalls, or projects getting delayed because there were, changes or some kind of problem. Those are also ones they want to listen to, because at the end of the day, they're thinking that these changes are actually going to make things move forward faster. But with any change, there's going to be a bunch of mayhem that's caused in the interim until we actually figure out what to do. The best mode of action is to, like, if you are going to make a statement, once again, connect it to an actual CRM project and how that was affected by either delays or benefited by the way that the system works, and then put that in there. So if the other thing to think about is if you just click that form letter that, like, the Society for Historical Art, well, they didn't do it, but anyone, if you see one of those in your feed and you just click yes on that, that's all treated as one. And once again, the reason why you got these laws is because there were many communities across the whole country that were all saying that they wanted to see some protections, and they weren't just form letters, right? And so you should really actually take the initiative to be an engaged citizen, right? Look up the actual people who run the area where you live and write something specifically to them when the opening comes, and then send that on to the federal government, right? So, because your local legislator may not even know what this impact could even be, right? So those are the kind of things that are sensible, and, don't get radicalized by the algorithm, man. The stuff is just scrolling by. You're clicking on stuff wildly. People are looking for clickbait. They're sitting on the toilet. They're sending this disinformation about how the sky is falling and everything else. Like, dude, yes, it is true. The sky is falling. We've known about climate change for like 100 years. Nobody is really acting like it's super urgent until their house is burning down, right? So the whole goal is, now that your house is burning down, put out the fire. Don't just, add into more stuff and mayhem and send multiple messages all over the internet that are not well informed, right? Join the democratic process. Be an American citizen. Make your voice heard and do it the way that's actually going to make change.
Right. But putting out the fire means learning how the hose works. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is you got to do the work. And as I talk to everyone, I talk to myself. Reading through 36 CFR 800 is a pain in my ass, and that's why I started this podcast with the quote from actual Section 106. So I'm like, okay, that part I can get my brain around. And now it really is, you guys, about slogging through 36 CFR 800. And like Bill was saying, it's specifics that are your friend. So if you want to battle against what's coming, you want to pick, are there 2 or 3 spots in 36 CFR 800 where they're changing it? And you can say, wait, this change is really going to destroy what happened before in this specific instance. You know what I mean? That's really worth doing. And actually, as you look through all the changes, and you guys, there's just hundreds. It's all over the place. If you're honest with yourself, you'll see 1 or 2 where you're like, yeah, I can see changing that way. That might be a little better, right? It's okay. You're not a terrible person going through a 50-page document that is full of bureaucratic gobbledygook. If you see 1 or 2 where you're like, yeah, that's actually an improvement.
We should be. People have been saying for a while that this needs to be augmented.
Yes.
This is not a new thing. There needs to be modifications here. And I think
it's okay. It's okay to open it.
The other thing is, agencies are actually they are working through and trying to streamline and fix 106, right? And this whole thing actually screws up the government's own work.
So here's the other thing. We will put in the show notes the hearing that happened last year, Chris Merrick, and it was such a awesome schooling in the process. And it definitely highlighted a lot of issues with the Section 106 process. And this is coming from the State Historic Preservation Officer for Utah. So, the one thing that I would say as far as an action item goes is please educate yourself, and don't just look at one source. Look at sources that maybe you wouldn't want to look at. But if you really want to educate yourself, you need to look at it from all sides, because in order, like I said, for us to be able to really have any kind of impact, we are going to have to understand the other side. That I shouldn't say the other side, but we're going to have to understand the people that have been promoting these modifications. And again, modification of it is needed. I think we all agree that these modifications aren't the best way, but I am going to say something that's not very popular, but I do think it's important to say. We, as a discipline, have put ourselves in this position. And I think
I'm already complaining about you on Twitter right now.
Good.
You're not supposed to record in the bathroom, man. You're supposed to actually be...
Oh, man. Okay, wait, you guys, I need a minute.
As a discipline, we need to be self-reflective. And we need to see how do we get to this point? And we cannot deny the fact that there are people that have been using Section 106 and weaponizing it for their own personal political agendas. And that, it will never stop, but we need to curtail it as much as possible. And I do believe it has become a part of our collective, psyche in some ways. And we need to change that. Like, as professionals, as regulatory professionals, we have a responsibility to the law, not to our emotions, not to our political agendas. We should be trying to preserve what is important in this country, not using cultural resource law to protect other things that are not part of the purview of Section 106. If you want to protect other things for their purposes, go and find a way of doing it separately. But when you basically pervert the Section 106 process and the regulations in the ACHP 36 CFR 800, whatever, you're bastardizing the process. And that is just a recipe for disaster. And we are in this position because people have been doing that for far too long. And unfortunately, now we're in a position where there are people that may not have a full understanding of the unintended consequences of these modifications. And if we don't reach out and really try to be self-reflective, reach out to the other side and find some common ground here, there are lots of people that are promoting these modifications that they believe in protecting our historic resources as well. So to demonize is not going to get us anywhere.
Such an important point. The two things I would say, and as first, you guys, Heather sort of quickly talked about the YouTube video of that hearing. I highly suggest you guys click on that. Like, I had my students watch that. It's just such an eye opener because a lot of it, it's most of the congressmen and stuff in there. It's not extreme left and extreme right. You will see one or two people on the extreme left and the extreme right, both virtue signaling their far extremes, and they're the worst ones. But what's so interesting is there's so many people in the middle trying to do real work. I highly recommend seeing that to see how the process actually works, right? And the other thing is, yes, again, obviously we keep hitting this. You have to educate yourself on this stuff, and it is difficult, right? So just, you have to do the hard work. And with that, when I look online about all the reactions on this, be it Twitter, be it Instagram, be it, YouTube or whatever, I have to say, and I'm bummed about this, almost every reaction I've seen has been reactionary and over the top and actually kind of wrong. And it bums me out because I watch these things, and these are from like social media personalities who are very good at talking and stuff. And I watch it and I'm like, damn it.
When you're starting off, let's take a moment of grief. Let's take a moment of silence for grief. Listen, that's not what this is about. We cannot be emotional.
Well, but hang on. Yeah. We're not Vulcans, man. We're not machines.
I understand
People have emotional reactions, and not only that, but they have the freedom to express those things in the ways that they feel.
And I have a freedom, to say I don't agree with that way of that mode of attacking, or I shouldn't say attacking, that mode of trying to find a solution here. We have a finite amount of time to find a solution here, and getting everybody revved up. That person that may have, whoever says these things, whoever's saying that may have those emotions, that's fine. I'm emotional about it too. But to that person, people that are saying this are in they have a major microphone right now because they're so influential. They're so knowledgeable about the subject. They're so knowledgeable. They have to understand that they're talking to people who are not knowledgeable. So those people are relying on them to be the beacon of sense. And to start off in an emotional reaction is not, we got to put our game face on. We cannot be playing with these, we can't be playing that way. We got to put our game face on to make a difference. And to be a moment of silence, that is just my opinion. That's their opinion.
They can put that on there, and this is my podcast, our podcast. I can say whatever I want, and I think that it is a foolhardy approach. And
I hear you. Yes. However, I would like to say they are also pushing to maintain cultural resources too. They're the other aisles that we need to be part of, right? They're expressing themselves in their own way. If it causes damage, that is not good. But us expressing ourselves in our way, and on this podcast, man, people have sent us responses and told us that we are not helping. So, and we're on episode 337, right? So we are expressing ourselves in our own way, but remember, we are pushing forward to try to maintain archaeology in the United States, man. Like, so how they communicated themselves doesn't jive with your system, but they're helping the cause too.
Okay, but Bill, we need to have a strategy. We have to have a strategy as profession. And if we are, unfortunately, the emotional response is the easy response. You know what the emotional response means? That means I can just go and be emotionally charged and upset about it. And that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm not going to go educate myself. And unfortunately, the general public, the way our society is right now, is everybody goes and argues and protests on emotion instead of protesting on facts. And right now, what we need to do, if we're not going to be speaking in an echo chamber, and if we're going to go and preach to the choir, then preach to the choir. But that's not going to get us anywhere. We need to find the similarities, not amongst ourselves, because I believe that the person who did that is a part of our profession. Obviously, they're on our side. But in order for us to reach out and make an impactful statement and actually be able to hopefully steer the ship another direction before this is over, we need to be able to find similarities in the group that is promoting these modifications. And doing it from an emotional perspective is just totally feeding into what people already expect from us. That's my thing. And I think there's so many people that are uneducated, and totally understandably so.
Yeah, that's the truth, because it's easy to react on an emotional scale, but it's hard to read 36 CFR 800. And so that's what you see. And again, unfortunately, I'm seeing people who are even sort of in the archaeology world represent this whole argument incorrectly. It's like, you guys go back and read the stuff.
I don't want to keep everybody all day, but I will tell you one thing though. That was not just one group that caused National Historic Preservation Act to get created, right? And it's not just one group or one approach that is going to get us to the place where we want to be, right? Because this today is one thing, but tomorrow the bigger problem is, how this isn't like valued by a bunch of other people. And we're not the only industry that we work in, and people don't actually value what we're doing, right? So it's not that we need to have every single person on our side. Yeah. But we do need to make sure that, we are actually advocating for our own field. However folks want to do it. But I will tell you, if you go the social media route, man, you're just going to be on there with the clown circus. You're going to need to actually follow whatever your community's democratic process is for addressing rules and laws in your community. Follow those. Be educated. Be a citizen, man. Like, grow up, essentially. And if this is something that you really care about, get in the fight. Because there is no end to this kind of stuff, right? The biggest problem we have is that we don't have robust, comprehensive, like multi-tiered laws to address heritage sites in the United States. We have like a couple. And so we can't live like this if we actually want to have heritage sites. If you want everything to be a data center and a Costco, then sweet. If not, then you're probably going to have to do something. And just like Heather was telling us, one person can change an entire town for a century. So I'll just say, get active, get out there, get educated, and do it in your own way, because we all have our own way of expressing ourselves.
Thank you, Bill. That's an excellent way to end this podcast. And we all get passionate, but we all are, we're all in one direction with the same purpose. And I appreciate that. And that's what it takes, is having people with divergent, opinions, so we can, iron sharpens iron. So with that, please stay educated. We will be doing our next podcast on Section 106, and we will be posting when the comment period starts. So your comments right now, anything you guys send out is not going to be part of the public comment period and in a matter of record unless you do it properly. So we'll be sending out more information on what to do that, how to do that. There are other organizations that are doing the same. So keep an eye out, keep engaged, and keep educated. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you later.
Next time, y'all.
Bye, keyboard warriors.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archpodnet.com/CRMArchPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at archpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks for listening to this podcast. The Archaeology Podcast Network's chief editor is Rachel Roden. Our executive producer is Ashley Airy. Our social media and newsletter coordinator is Matilda Siebrecht. The APN was founded by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle on December 1st, 2014. We're supported by our amazing podcast hosts, many volunteers, and listeners like you. Check out membership at www.archpodnet.com/members.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.